Hi everyone, and welcome back to Stefan Livera podcast, brought to you by Bold. You can find it over at getbold.io. That's for the American listeners who want to stack sats with Bold. Rejoining me today is Miljan from Primal. Miljan, welcome back to the show.
Hey Stefan, good to be back.
So I know there's lots of things to share on Primal 2.0 and what's happening, the latest in the world of Nostr. Maybe you just want to give us a bit of an overview. What's changed since our most recent on the podcast chat about Nostr? Just kind of generally, what's the biggest update since?
Yeah, I think we talked maybe a year ago or so, maybe a little bit less.
A little under. Months. Maybe it would have been just after Atlantis, I think. So maybe 7-8 months ago, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. So 8 months is a long time in Nostr. In a protocol that's so young like this, every year is like you see massive changes, right? So think about Bitcoin, let's say in 2011, 2012 type of thing, where, 2 years ago, Nostr was almost unusable. 3 years ago, you had to build your own client to kind of participate in Nostr. That's like the first cohort of users there were actually developers who were just building the stuff out. But then you look at the rest of the trajectory, and then, back when we talked last, there were already a number of Nostr products, Nostr clients, services, and so forth, which, by the way, are being just stood up organically. There's no central planning or coordination. This is an open protocol, and people just build what they think is useful. And then users kind of decide. The user is the judge, just like it should be in the free market. So when we spoke last time, 8 months ago, we already had a number of products on Nostr that were starting to be quite usable. It was starting to be user-friendly even for those who are not super savvy or super motivated to kind of participate in this network early on. And you could kind of, if you squinted back then, you could see where things are going and how, the Nostr products are going to continue to improve rapidly and evolve, and at some point reach and in some ways exceed the capabilities of the legacy kind of web apps. So I think now we're at the end of 2024, we're starting to see that. And
talk a little bit about what would you say are the big thematic changes? Like, are there changes to the experience? Is it a change in the application types? Is it, the way we interact is updating?
Right. So some of the early specs that looked very promising, let's say a year and a half ago, I'll use one example. I use the DVM spec that was created by Pablo, the data vending machine spec. Those of us who are kind of deep into this technology were super excited about this spec like a year ago. And to kind of bring listeners up to speed, the data vending machine spec is quite powerful. Essentially, it allows you to use Nostr public relay infrastructure to request some jobs to be done and then kind of get a marketplace of agents or bots to accomplish those jobs. And it's quite versatile. It's very generic. You can do all kinds of things, including creating custom feeds. So there's a subset of that spec that allowed anyone to create a custom feed of Nostr events, content of Nostr, and publish that feed. There's a special event where you say, hey, here I've created a custom feed and I've published it. This is how you can access it. And any client can then use that feed. It's like a collection of Nostr event IDs to display this custom feed. So this kind of was created a year ago, and a few devs were tinkering with it. And then it organically grew into something much bigger, to the point where we now have a public feed marketplace on Nostr. So if you kind of back up and if you look at the big picture of social media, the users don't get much choice. You basically, on Twitter, you have your follows and the For You feed. And the most other social media clients have just the feed
just
that
the standard
they serve
feed,
you, right?
Yeah.
You don't have much agency.
Maybe you've
right?
got the list feature, and you got to manually pick and put things in lists and things. Yeah.
Yes, you don't have much agency as a user on these kind of closed platforms out there. Nostr is open, so anyone could create a feed, and any client application can decide which feeds to display. So this took a little bit of time to mature. But then, back a few months ago, we at Primal realized that this is already a thing. There is already like a number of feeds that were being published by like developers out there. And then there were already a few clients like Coracle, Amethyst, Nostrudel that tapped into this feed marketplace, and they were displaying these publicly kind of published feeds. So at Primal, we looked at this and we're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we want to support. This is we want to be a part of this. So we leaned into this in a big way. So in Primal 2.0, we've done 3 things to support this feed marketplace idea. Number one, we re-architected the user interface of our entire app, or more precisely, the 3 apps that we have, iOS, Android, and web, in a way that enables displaying, kind of managing an unlimited number of feeds. So when you're in the home screen, you can swipe left and right through any number of feeds, or you can pick like in a feed selector UI. And then you can browse the feed marketplace. You can just press the button that says add custom feed. We display the feed marketplace right there in the UI of the application. And then you can preview any of those feeds. And if you like it, you can add it to your list of available feeds. And then you can reorder your feeds, and you can set any feed to be your default feed. When you open the app, that's the first thing you see. So this kind of illustrates the power of such an open network where, we at Primal are not going to be the ones to decide for everyone what their feed should look like. The user gets that to decide. They have that agency, and they can very easily customize their look and feel there. So backing up, we re-architected the UI of the application to enable infinite feeds. We incorporated the feed marketplace into this UI. And then at Primal, we build client applications, but we also build and run services for Nostr. So we build a bunch of custom feeds. And previously, those feeds were only available within the Primal applications. But we decided that every feed that we create will publish to the feed marketplace and make it available to anyone on Nostr and any other client application that supports this spec. So this is just one example of how open networks win. Or I would say in this instance, we're on the trajectory of winning. All of this, like we started off with a spec that was picked up by a few developers and few clients. Now there is a lot more support for this approach on Nostr. Many more users now through Primal 2.0 are able to participate in this feed marketplace, which incentivizes more developers to build more interesting feeds and grow this marketplace. And by the way, these feeds could be free or paid for. And you can kind of see, you no longer need to squint to see how how we'll end up with the most powerful set of apps and the most interesting content on Nostr, which is, I think, the reason ultimately why Nostr is going to win.
Interesting. And this reminds me of, and I'm sure you saw this, there was a clip floating around from the HRF Oslo Freedom Forum. I believe it was Lynn Alden interviewing Jack Dorsey, and he was making this comment that, okay, yeah, freedom of speech is one thing, but actually it's more about being able to choose your feed in that sense. So I guess this is kind of very much in that same vein of thought that when you have different options of what your feed looks like, then maybe that opens up different options. I guess imagine, historically when, there were only a few TV channels and the state controlled them or had access to them, then there's sort of a certain level of control over what gets produced and what most people see. What media are they consuming in terms of television or radio in those days, when those were the only kind of mainstream forms. Whereas nowadays it's this anarchic environment where people can choose their own feed. So, and I'm sure some people will maybe do manual curation, like it's actually a human making it. And in other cases, maybe it's more like an automated feed that's picking up, okay, I'm going to pick up these kinds of events, these kinds of topics that are interesting for the people who are subscribed to this feed.
Yes, absolutely, and thanks for reminding me of that, because that illustrates this kind of rapid development of the Nostr network quite well. When was Oslo? Beginning of June this year, something like that.
I can't remember. Yeah, around May or June, something like that.
Late May, early June, and Jack and Lynn were talking on stage there, and Jack was aware of the technology, that he was aware that this was possible. But we didn't have all of these things kind of put together in a way that's easy to use. And now we're at the beginning of December, not that much later. And you have multiple clients that have built this into their user interfaces in different ways. Every client developer gets to decide how to present this to their users. And you have many more feeds published in this feed marketplace. But this feels like it's the beginning. Now this is obviously real to anyone who is paying attention. And I think that our next conversation in 8 months from now might be quite a bit more interesting even than it is right now.
But let's try to put this into practical context. So as an example, do you see this being a way that different kinds of communities can come to Nostr, because they can people can set up their base of who they're, because obviously, as you know, in the early days, it was kind of Bitcoiners and, but over time, there are other groups of people who come for various reasons. It could be that they like the free speech aspect of it. I've heard, actually from speaking to Teruko, I remember at one point she was telling me that there were a bunch of Japanese Nostr users who didn't even care about the Bitcoin part of it. They just liked Nostr. So it's sort of interesting to see that there's different communities coming up. So can you, I guess, put that into context? What could that mean in terms of users of Nostr? Right.
So we already have these several different communities without much overlap actually on Nostr, which is quite interesting. It's interesting to observe this entire phenomenon. I don't think we've ever had anything like this. Maybe the early days of the internet are kind of a good parallel, where things are just evolving organically and people do whatever they want to do on this network. They stand up services, they build applications, and they participate as users in the network as they see fit. So this doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all everywhere. We at Primal, we run our own relays and our own caching service and our own clients, and we get to set the rules of what happens on Primal. But every other participant of this open network can do the same thing. So what does this mean? Like, what are other kind of examples, or if we play this out, what does this idea of an open feed marketplace look like in practice, a year or more from now? I think if we look at what's already there, the types of feeds that have been created, you kind of get a glimpse of it, so in addition to the usual kind of trending feeds and these types of things that are to be expected to be seen, you see feeds that are related to or specializing only in Bitcoin mining, for example. So there's a Bitcoin mining feed out there. So it's a much more specialized feed catering to a specific community with a high quality of signal. You have Fluffy Friends feed with a bunch of cats, dogs, other animals, and it's like a fun feed to browse. At Primal, we are kind of deploying some AI models, and we're trying to analyze the content of the network, and we're going to release feeds as they are ready, out of band with our kind of regular release schedule. Whenever a new feed is ready, we'll just release it. So one that we're working on that I'd like to release soon is just a bloom scrolling feed, as in contrast to doom scrolling that you get on Twitter, where like typically, at least the feedback that we get from a lot of Twitter users, that it gets quite dark there at times, and they get subjected to some things that don't make them feel good at the end of their browsing session. And I think it goes to incentives of Twitter and these legacy social media companies, which make more money the more quote unquote engaged you are, the more probably the more enraged you are. You're likely to respond to something and kind of get entangled in some sort of a fight online. In contrast to that, the Nostr, at Primal, we decided to monetize in a completely different way, and we can talk about that maybe later. We launched Primal Premium, where the user is our customer. We don't make more money the more the user is engaged and the more time they waste on Nostr. We make money when they see value in the products that we develop, and which incentivizes us to create high quality signal and something that that the users are willing to pay for. So this bloom scrolling idea would be, good vibes on Nostr. Like if you want to see be subjected to some positive news and developments on Nostr, of which there are many, there would be a feed dedicated to that. So Fantastic. Many other examples of things that we're working on.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit. So you mentioned Primal 2.0, I presume obviously as part of that, but can you just explain, other than the feeds aspect, what else is kind of what else are the big key things that people should know about Primal 2.0?
Sure. So Primal 2.0 was a very big release. It took us a while to push it out, and in retrospect, probably should have been multiple releases. So we introduced multiple major things in this release, starting with reads. So reads is a major top-level tab which covers long-form textual content on Nostr. So it's a competitor to Substack and Medium. And like I said, we decided to bring this type of content up to the top level. So it's a major tab in all of our apps, where you get the list of blogs, articles, essays, long-form textual content. You get a feed for that. And in fact, you get many different feeds of this type of content. So you get, Bitcoin related stuff, or philosophy, or sci-fi, or cooking, or whatever you're interested in. And the reason why I think this content is this type of content is important is because it kind of adds nuance to the public discourse. So Primal already had the competency of dealing with kind of microblogging, short form content, kind of Twitter competitor. You can think of Primal 2.0 as both Twitter and Substack kind of baked into the same application. Yeah. Exactly, Nostrified. So reads is the first kind of big thing that we launched. The next one is this feed marketplace concept that I already covered, where you can participate in the Nostr feed marketplace, and every one of the top level tabs has the capability to tap into the marketplace. Then we've added the Explore top level item that allows you to discover different type of content or users on Nostr in a very easy way. So the Explore tab gives you, again, the feed marketplace. It gives you the Nostr profiles that you might not be aware of, that might be of interest to you. It gives you top zaps. So we list all of the zaps in the last 24 hours by zap amount, and you see who zapped whom and what was the content that was zapped. So it allows you to discover users who are zapping, users who are getting zapped, and the content that's getting zapped there. So it's a very interesting discovery mechanism. Then we have the media tab in the Explorer section that looks a lot like an Instagram kind of grid layout of thumbnails of videos and photos. Again, that's a different way to discover new content. And the last one is topics. So the most popular topics in the last 24 hours based on the frequency of that hashtag appearing in notes and so forth. So that's the new Explore section. And then on top of that, we implemented advanced search, which in itself probably should have been a release in its own right. I think that Nostr now has the most advanced search of any social media. So we can get into that in a bit more detail if you're interested. And then finally, we launched Primal Premium, where for $7 a month, you get a Primal name and you get a bunch of powerful Nostr tools. So power users. So the Primal name gives you a verified Nostr address, like Stefan at primal.net. It gets you a friendly Lightning address for our built-in custodial Lightning wallet, also Stefan at primal.net. And it gives you the VIP URL on primal.net. So primal.net/Stefan. So it makes it easier to find you on Nostr. And then we have a bunch of Nostr tools as a part of Primal Premium, which we can get into if you're interested.
Back to the show in a moment. This show brought to you by CoinKite.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices, such as the Coldcard Mark IV and the new Coldcard Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, you have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases, you can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, if you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your cold card. The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold Vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 or 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Coldcard hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. And now, back to the show. Yeah, and I mean, I think I've been quite impressed with the app myself. I've been obviously playing around with it and having a look at some of the features. I was having a play with the reads component, right, like you mentioned. And I think it's interesting seeing there's so much stuff people are writing, and it's really good in that way because I think it's going to be really interesting just to see where the competition goes in terms of like Substack versus Primal and kind of Nostr long form content, text form, let's say, and even X, which also has their kind of articles as well. So I think it's kind of, there's going to be all these different ways that you can put material out there. But I think there is an advantage around Nostr and the open aspect of it, that it's just kind of, you can, and the other thing that I find interesting is that you can use the Primal. Now, yes, you could copy paste the note identifier, but that's kind of a bit clunky. Whereas if you just copy paste and you can share like the Primal link for that, then it's actually a bit easier that way as well. But yeah, I guess I'm just curious to see or to hear your thoughts on how the competition goes there between, you know, the various different forms of posting long form material. Do you see this as a kind of, you know, in the old days, I guess, sorry, long question, but in the old days, people had RSS, right? So you probably did this and I did this. Like I had a RSS feed, right? And I would subscribe to different blogs and I would read, you know, like that. Nowadays, you've got, you know, the world of Substack and all these different things. So I'm curious how you see Nostr, I guess, evolving and competing in this kind of modern era on the reads front.
This is super exciting to me. So you mentioned, you know, creators of long-form textual content have a number of different options at their disposal currently. So you mentioned Substack or Medium, and Twitter/X have their own articles now as well. And then there's Nostr, and only one of these is actually open. And let's kind of dissect this and see what happens when you publish on an open network. Because we're not only talking about articles themselves, we're talking about a number of different artifacts that are related to those articles.
Right, like the way we interact with those things, yeah.
Exactly. So let's say you wrote a long-form article and I was reading through it and I create a highlight. And this isn't something that's new in Nostr. I believe it was maybe Medium or a product like that introduced this idea years ago. But when you highlight something on Medium, that highlight is forever trapped in that kind of closed silo and doesn't really do much beyond that. Whereas when you create a highlight on Nostr, highlight is a Nostr event that gets published to Nostr relays and becomes available to any Nostr developer to do whatever they can come up with. And as a consequence, you get a proliferation of these artifact types, and the schema that you get to develop against on Nostr becomes much richer, and the number of applications that these types of things surface in kind of proliferates as well. And as a consequence, when you create a highlight today on a Nostr article, you will see much more engagement around that highlight than you would on Medium. Even though that Medium has many orders of magnitude more users, and Nostr is still young, you can see that there's like a level of liveliness there around these artifacts that get published on Nostr. We're just beginning. We're not even, you know, in the first 1,000th of the kind of user base that Nostr is eventually going to have.
As a quick example, I could imagine people could build out apps that, let's say, curate and take the highlights across all these different long reads or primal reads, as an example in this case, and kind of present to people, here are some of the top highlighted sections, right? Like if I'm thinking back, kind of unrelated but sort of related, if I think about Amazon Kindle, right? Sometimes when you're reading through Kindle, you can sort of see, lots of people highlighted this segment, so maybe it would be interesting, this part of the book. So maybe it's a similar kind of thing, but it's obviously a more open platform, right? It's not kind of Amazon, Jeff Bezos's sort of closed platform. It's kind of just this open thing, and it's just out there. It's flying around on all these different relays, and you just kind of pick and choose what relay you want to work with and what accounts you want to follow, or what pub key you want to follow, to be more precise, I guess. So it's just a very different way of engaging, and hopefully we will see interesting products and services that are built on top of this, right?
Yes, absolutely. So this we see these benefits in these artifact types, but also when it comes to discoverability, integrating social media feeds with long form feeds and long form artifacts like highlights and comments on highlights and so forth is a great way for users to discover this long form content. It's very interesting to observe what happened when Primal launched support for long form content in such a major way, as a major tab. Everyone's reporting, and this is quite evident, that the amount of activity around long form content just exploded, where there are many more articles being published. The articles are getting supported financially a lot more than before in terms of zaps. There are more comments, more highlights, etc., etc. Where if you take Twitter and Substack as the kind of counter example of that, where Elon famously stopped linking to Substack at some point,
right.
And by the way, that was Substack's main source of traffic for years. That Twitter was top of their funnel. One day, Elon just decided to stop this. So we're talking about these walled gardens where the walls are getting taller. And then the kind of the contrast, the stark contrast to that is a Nostr, which is a radically open network where everything is open to everyone, both in terms of users and developers. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about the way this unfolds from here.
Yeah, really interesting. And one comment I would add to what you're saying there is, of course, if it's a private platform, of course, people can do what they want with their private platform. I think the concept, though, of a public town hall sort of led, at least in the historical years of Twitter, before all these other things came up and before it became X, there was a sense in which this was kind of the public record, or but they wanted it to be, that's the place people go to get the updates, right? So obviously everybody's competing for that. People want to be the place everybody goes. But at the same time, there's this kind of duality of people like being able to go there because that's where they might find as a jumping off point. But then when Elon bought X, and look, on net, I think that was a good thing. But on net, though, he did want to try to keep you inside that garden, because again, that's the incentive. He wants to make this the number one platform. And so by limiting the visibility of linking out to Substack or linking out to your YouTube channel or whatever else, it kind of, it was sort of a double-edged sword for the creators on the platform, because then now if you're a creator on the platform, you're feeling a bit more like, oh, okay, I get it. Like Elon is trying to push me to create natively for X, right? To write an article on X and not write on Substack or write somewhere else and link to it, because that won't get boosted in the algorithm per se. Because again, it comes back to there being kind of one algorithm as opposed to this feed marketplace. So to me, there's there are all these different components that are competing, but in the world of Nostr, the argument is, look, it's all open. It's on relays. You subscribe to those relays. You get updates from those relays, whether whichever relays you want. And there's not really a sense of, oh, I'm worried about posting this particular link because it might deboost me, or it may limit my visibility and therefore not get views and clicks.
Yeah, I agree. There's no doubt that humanity needs a global public town square. This is quite a powerful concept, and we have the technological capabilities to have this. The question is, what should that look like? Should it be a service, a platform that's controlled by one company or one person? I think everybody agrees that nobody should have that kind of power. It's just like, even if the most benevolent leader is going to run into all kinds of problems trying to run a service like that. So there is that one problem of control. The second problem is one of authenticity. How do we know that on Twitter or X, there's no way to know that somebody that actually posted something? You can, just because it was posted by a certain account, it doesn't mean that that person actually posted it. There's no signing. No one holds their keys. There's one company that holds everyone's keys when it comes to posting. So there's no way to verify that any content is actually authentic. On Nostr, we have that. All Nostr users hold their keys, and there's no way to forge anything that's published on Nostr. There's an easy way to verify that it was actually posted by that person or that company. So this combination of control and authenticity is something that absolutely needs to be resolved for something to be a credible public town square. And Nostr is the only game in town. It's the only protocol that enables both, that kind of brings both of these things.
This show brought to you by mempool.space, the world's leading Bitcoin visualizer. And now they've got an accelerator program. So if you have a transaction that you sent at a fee that was too low to get confirmed, now you can fix this with the mempool accelerator. The way it works, you can go and search your transaction, scroll down, click accelerator, and you don't need an account. You can pay with Lightning, and then it'll show you it's now in the process of being accelerated, and then after a few minutes, it's confirmed. And so this is a great way to help you out if you are stuck. And this can happen where maybe your wallet doesn't have RBF or CPFP, or it might help you in situations where it's impractical to go and re-sign. So for example, multi-sig with keys in different locations. And thirdly, even in some Lightning scenarios, perhaps a forced close, you might not be able to use RBF. And so in this case, the mempool accelerator can help you out. So keep it in mind, and you can find out more over at mempool.space/accelerator. This show also brought to you by Nomad Capitalist. Nomad Capitalist is a leading provider in terms of offshore tax and lifestyle strategy planning and implementation. They can help you go overseas and legally lower your taxes. As many of you know, I grew up in Australia, but I left. I was sick of it in terms of the taxes and the COVID tyranny and all these other things. And so that's why I left, and now I live in Dubai. But that's not necessarily the place for you. You have to think exactly what works for you, for your family, for your business. And Nomad Capitalists have worked across dozens of different countries. They've helped people get passports, residences, bank accounts, and all kinds of other things. And importantly, it's not just about choosing one place. It may be multiple places. And it may be also about making the pieces fit together in terms of how your business fits with your family and you as an individual. Nomad Capitalists have helped many, many people in terms of going overseas. And if you're interested, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. This is applicable for people with a net worth above $1 million US. That's nomadcapitalist.com/apply. And now back to the show. Okay. And so I am also curious if you had any thoughts on things like social media bans, or as an example, I'm thinking of a case in Australia where they recently passed a ban for social media for under 16-year-old people. Now, I believe that comes into play in 2026, and I'm presuming the way the Australian government is going to try to do that is to sort of go after the providers and say, see, you need to put in some kind of age verification. Obviously, there were arguments around this being an ID sort of forcing function to force everybody to KYC, because the only way you can do it, because how else do you know if that user is over 16? These kinds of things. I'm curious if you see something like Nostr playing a role there. Like, do you think that, let's say, that could play a role where under 16s in countries like this might say, yeah, I'm going to just use Nostr instead?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I just saw that headline a few days ago, and you might be more up to speed there than I am regarding what's actually going on in Australia. I just thought it was crazy, and I had the same thought as you. Whereas, like, this smells like an attempt to enforce some sort of digital ID on everyone in order to, quote, save the children, right?
Right.
And it's the type of argument that can be made that a lot of people might swallow. But I think it's going to be interesting for them to try to actually enforce something like that when something like Nostr exists. It's so easy to create like a key pair and participate on Nostr. So it might be one of those cases where it's like, China banned Bitcoin for the 10th time. It might be like Australian government banned social media or banned Nostr for the 50th time. Of course, if you have the capability to ban something, why do you need to ban it multiple times? I don't really have any more sophisticated thoughts on the topic other than that, but other than just to see how interesting it's going to be to watch this unfold.
One other thought, I'm curious to get where you see, to understand where you think, or to understand how you think on this. What about in cases of, let's say, censorship? It may be, not just Australia, but other countries around the world where technically it might be illegal to post certain forms of message or material. Do you think people might still be deterred because they might think, look, even if the government has shut down X or some other access to some other social media, they might be worried that if they post something on Nostr anyway, that it could just be against the law anyway. So do you think in practice it will end up being a censorship-resistant network, or do you see it more like people will self-censor because of the laws or the whatever country they're in?
So the power dynamic is different on an open network versus like a closed network that's owned by a company, right? So let's take Primal as an example. We are a company. We exist as a legal entity in multiple jurisdictions. Our apps exist in app stores. Our servers exist in multiple jurisdictions, et cetera, et cetera. So as a company, we are subject to laws, and we have to, make our own decisions regarding what's allowed on our platform and what isn't. But we have no power over Nostr. So on Nostr, let's contrast that to Twitter, let's say, or X, where, well, that's the end of the story. X is a company and they're subject to laws. And, if a judge in Brazil says you have to censor these accounts, after a lot of bad noise, you end up censoring those accounts. I think that's how that played out. And I sympathize with the struggle there, where X tried to fight this, and in final analysis realized they couldn't. So in contrast, you have an open protocol that is Nostr, where a number of different projects, a number of different kind of players exist there. Primal is one of many. Even though it's so early, there are hundreds of projects already. And governments can lean on companies, and we have to comply with laws, of course. But you only get so far by leaning on Primal, let's say. And given that it's an open network, anyone can run a relay, and anyone can create a key pair, and anyone can stand up a service or build a client. It's going to be much harder to enforce this on an entire Nostr network.
Yeah, I see. And so hypothetically, they could say, a government could come to you and say, hey, ban this, ban that, whatever. You're not allowed to relay this content. You're not allowed to serve this user, whatever. But ultimately, Nostr exists. It is a decentralized network, so anyone can set up their own relay, set up their own, thing, and just start posting out updates. And it's like the internet. It's like trying to stop information on the internet. So I guess it has that benefit going for it. So yeah, it is. I think it's a good point you make about the power dynamic there. And so yeah, let's see what happens. I think part of this is, Nostr is still young. It's still very early days. And so the real test may come in the future, like let's say, a year or 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, maybe Nostr has grown, and maybe at that point it is starting to pose a threat to some politician or some government somewhere, and they try to, stop it, but it's sort of, maybe they kind of realize, but that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe it'll be more like they go to the relays, maybe they go to the apps, they try to sort of stop certain forms of content being shared, but they can't actually stop it. They can only stop maybe some people viewing it through certain apps.
I think that's the way it plays out. And hopefully the network develops in a way that makes it that makes the prospect of trying to censor content on it like that almost like hopeless for actors who would like to try that. I'm sure we're going to run into this. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. And then I guess if you've got any thoughts on, or I don't know if you have any stats or any numbers on how many people are using Nostr, or how many, events are being posted, this kind of thing.
Yeah, we publish those stats. So for listeners, Primal runs a global Nostr indexer. So we attempt to index all content that's published to all public relays. And we publish those stats in real time. If you go to primal.net/explore, you can, in the corner there, you will see the latest stats. It is not easy to decipher. It's not like totally trivial to decipher actual real human users compared to bots and so forth. And this is not only the case on Nostr, this is the case on every social media network. And I think most legacy network kind of pump their numbers by including bots in there and so forth. In terms of active users, active human users, our estimates are that we're probably on the order of like a couple 100,000. So it's not a large network in absolute terms. And sometimes people get discouraged when they look at these numbers and they compare, this to, let's say, Twitter, Facebook, or even some of the up-and-coming networks like Blue Sky that recently added millions of new users. So what I'd like to point out in these scenarios is it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. It's like comparing Bitcoin to Venmo. Blue Sky is, even though they have some sort of quasi protocol going on, really it's one company that controls the protocol. They hold everyone's keys and they run the biggest server. And then they have a marketing department that promotes the product and onboards users and so forth. If we're looking at a real self-sovereign network where two conditions need to be met. Users need to hold their keys to actually be self-sovereign in this network. And anyone should be able to run any part of the infrastructure on this network. And not just be able to run, but we need to see evidence that actually infrastructure out there is being run by a number of different actors and not just centralized in a few hands. Only Nostr satisfies these two criteria. Only on Nostr do you have a couple 100,000 users who are holding their own keys and bootstrapping this new self-sovereign network. And only on Nostr you see thousands of people running relays and hundreds of projects building applications and services on top of this open protocol. Nostr is quite unique in that sense. Yes, its growth is quite a bit slower in terms of user base compared to some of the centralized networks. But when you look at developer mindshare and the kind of developer growth, it's a different story altogether. It's extremely popular among developers, and the developer ecosystem around Nostr is quite vibrant. And when you look at the incentives for developers who are starting new projects, where the dilemma might be, should I bootstrap my own network from scratch, or should I tap into an existing network that's there for me with a number of users and actual content that I can tap into? The open network is much more attractive. So I'm sure we'll be seeing more and more of this. And as these products and services that are being built on top of Nostr become more and more sophisticated, and there's a lot of evidence for that. I mean, we've covered some of those examples in our conversation today. As those projects become more sophisticated, they will attract users. And which will in turn produce more content and add gravity to this network. So I think we'll see some inflection points where Nostr ends up growing rapidly, it's quite exciting to see. And again, it feels like we're participating at the very early stage and something that's extremely special.
Yeah. So
I mean,
you touched on this earlier, but if we were in Bitcoin years, where is Nostr? Like, what year would it be?
I would say 2011, 2012. So a lot of listeners here, maybe 100% of our listeners are Bitcoiners. So think about just in those terms. And I know, and by the way, there's a lot of high quality Bitcoin content on Nostr. That's actually one of the critiques of Nostr, that it's like, oh, it's too much Bitcoin content. I kind of disagree. I think there's not enough Bitcoin content. I think we need to lean into it even more and have even more Bitcoin content, especially now with a long form kind of textual content being a first class citizen, let's say on Primal. And again, we're seeing that, like where, I want to bring in the Bitcoin classics essays, for example, onto Nostr. Just like, of course, this needs to happen. We'll make sure it does, etc., right? So, this is it's a great time to be a part of something special at an early stage.
Fantastic. So, any other big updates on Primal that we missed there?
So I mentioned Primal Premium, and this is another kind of big topic on Nostr, which is how to ethically monetize. A social media company. Primal is a company. We kind of look at Nostr as a way to solve many of the problems that exist in the legacy web. We already covered topics of control and user sovereignty, but also the topic of perverse incentives that exist on the legacy web. Those types of problems need to be solved, and Nostr looks very promising when it comes to that. So at Primal, we don't monetize user data. We don't sell advertising. Our incentives aren't to kind of spy on our users to provide the best possible product to our customers who are advertisers. That's not the model we're following. Instead of that, the users are our customers. And we wake up every morning to make the product better for our users. Primal Premium includes, as I mentioned, a Primal name, as well as a bunch of Nostr tools which are useful to Nostr users. This includes a Premium Relay, advanced search, which is extremely capable. You can search in all kinds of different ways on Nostr. And I think we've completely destroyed the narrative that Nostr has the discovery problem. Nostr now has the most powerful search of any social media network. I invite you to try it out. And then you can create custom feeds using this kind of search mechanism where if you have a very advanced search that you would like to go back to, you can simply save it as a feed. So that's available there too. We offer full content backup for our premium users, where when you publish content on Nostr, you publish it to a number of relays. And there is no guarantee by any relay that they will keep your content for any amount of time. That's why you publish to a number of relays. Primal Premium includes this capability to save all your content over the long run and gives you the ability to very easily rebroadcast your content to any number of relays, as well as to download copies of your content so you can save it locally. So there's a lot more coming in Primal Premium, but the response so far has been overwhelmingly positive, and we kind of have already, it's been just over a week, maybe 10 days since we launched. We already have enough signal to know that it looks like this is going to be viable, and are looking forward to serving our users and not caring about advertisers.
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating thing, and yeah, hopefully it's going to be one of those things where people might be, on one hand, sort of disappointed that it's not like mainstream already, but on the other hand, also excited because there's all this potential of what you could build. And sometimes there's an excitement of going west and kind of going somewhere while it's still young and early, and there's an opportunity to sort of be in on the ground floor or relatively early, even if you're not exactly ground floor. Maybe we're just kind of relatively early. There's a lot of people sort of establishing their niches of what kind of things they post and talk about on Nostr, and some of that's different to X as well, or other platforms. So yeah, let's see where it goes. Where can people find you guys online?
Primal.net is where you can find our web app, and primal.net/download is where you can find all of our or both of our mobile apps.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, I want to encourage listeners, follow Miljan, check it out, have a go with Primal. I've enjoyed my experiences so far, so, give it a try, and let's see if this whole decentralized, Nostr protocol works out, hey?
We'll make it work out.
All right, well, thanks for joining me, Miljan.
Good to be here. Thank you.